So all of you guys, I'm sure at some point you're amazed and you love the weather like I do, but it was probably because of some major event that happened in your life. Uh, in my case, there are two or three, but this certainly was the most impactful, and of course it was Carol. Uh, Probably most of you that are on here today, I could have you raise your hands, but I can't see you. Uh, that you probably weren't around when this happened. I was around, and the eye of the storm went right over my house, or my grandparents' house down in Connecticut. So we'll be talking about that. But right now, I just want to start off with a few. Don, am I okay on the screen? It's not showing notes.
Yep, right.
Okay, great. So we do really have a low frequency. We've only had 12 major storms hit here since the year 1900, but that doesn't preclude many smaller and brushes that we've had with some pretty active, even Katrina, for example, had some effects up here. So since the year 2000, we've had 42 systems that some of them tropical, some of them not too tropical. Just to mention a few: Allison, Gustav, Bonnie, you might remember, Ivan, Irene, obviously, Joaquin. I'm mispronouncing that. Even Sandy had some effects here. So there have been many storms that have come very close, but the real big ones, the Category 3 ones, there are only three, and they happened in 16 years of each other. 38 that Dr. Menzinger talked about. 44 was the most impactful on Cape Cod, where I live now, but it did more destruction than any of the other ones. Carol, of course, was a 3-2. I usually show this slide when at men's clubs and things like that with a lot of people that don't really understand hurricanes and where that they come in bursts. For example, the 1950s and 60s were remarkable. Upper left-hand corner of your screen. But even more remarkable is look at the number of storms that just missed us during that decade. It was absolutely scary. If any of them, even a few more had come over us. And then, of course, the 70s and 80s, where there was really next to nothing, no activity up here. I show this slide also because they sometimes say, well, what should we be looking for? I don't really know a lot about hurricanes. And I say just one important thing: watch the Bahamas. All of the major storms that have come up here have their birth right there. They might have come across, but they really gain their strength right in the Bahamas and then head right up the coast. So here are some of the big ones that we've had. Carol, of course, enormous. Bob was the biggest, certainly on the Cape here. I lost 21 trees in my property here on the Cape. In fact, talking to my wife after it really never was the same. The property was so beautiful before that, and it really did a job on it. Bertha and Floyd were not much of a storms, but they're in the top group that you see here. And of course, our geographer, he said disaster. Buzzards Bay, just a disaster down there. The hurricanes usually drive a wall of water, as you know, right up the coast, over right into those bays. They can fill up Buzzards Bay, Narragansett Bay to the matter of 10, 12, 13 feet very easily. And sticking out like we do, we're just asking for trouble here. Common characteristics. Speed is the thing that was so bothersome to the forecasters back in the 1938. They had no idea that a storm could pick up at the speed that it did. I've read various reports on this. The average one is 33 coming across the Outer Banks and then up to here, but the 38 storm could have been moving at as fast as 60 miles an hour. And then, of course, heavy rain and flooding. Winds and the surges are almost always to the east. And storm surge, you're quite familiar with that. You're all weather people. I don't really need to spend a lot of time on that slide. A Category 3, you're guaranteed 10 to 15 feet of water on up and down the southeast part of the state. And the worst place to be is in that dangerous right quadrant. Winds are usually, and you know this too, in a very narrow place. 25 miles for Hurricane Bob. There's the wind profile that you can see over there on the right. But the 1938 storm had 60 miles from the eye. You were still getting hurricane force winds. So this slide shows the path of the strongest winds for Carol. Where the A is in August, that's my grandparents' summer home. And you could see that the strongest winds actually went to the east of us. We did not have tremendous tree damage, just terrible surge damage. And there's another slide showing, again, the winds in Carol and where the strongest winds were. Every once in a while, though, nature will throw us a curveball, and Irene was it. Irene, if you look at the satellite picture, there was quite a storm. It did start to fill and turn extratropical as it was reaching the coast. And it didn't go over New England. It went over New York City and up the Hudson River Valley and then curved back into Vermont. But it was, as I said, 250 miles away. What you see on the slide on the left is a place called the Beach Club. It's in Centerville. Actually right on Craigville Beach, if you're familiar with that, where I had an anemometer. I'm a member there on the roof that I installed, and got gusts to 90 miles an hour there, and a tidal surge you can see right up to the deck of approximately 5 feet. So let's get to Carol. That, by the way, that slide there is a picture of Galilee. There were 80 boats in there for a fishing tournament, and that's at the height of the storm. Now, everybody thinks, if you read back about how wonderful the 50s were, and gasoline, what does it say there, 25 cents, and there were a lot of good movies. But I have some real bad feelings about that time. For 1952, 53, 54, there was something happening very similar to what's happening to us today, and that was the polio epidemic. I did not go to a movie. My mother would not let us. My friends never went for 3 summers in a row. There was over 60,000 people were stricken with polio, and over 3,000 perished, and many became paralyzed. So it was kind of a scary time, all 3 of those summers for us. All right, so there I am up in a tree in 1954. And the beautiful home you see over on the right was my grandparents' home. It was on Eastern Point, Groton, Connecticut. As my sister and I have always said, we were born 2 generations too late. But still, I was lucky enough that up until my 18th year, I got to spend my summers there. And I worked down at a club I'll be talking to you about in a minute. I show you this slide. You see the seawall there. Well, in front of the seawall, there were rocks that went out, and you could walk on them all the way out probably another 100 feet. During Carol, the waves were breaking off that porch, which is about 13 feet above sea level, high tide. For over a week, Carol had made her attack on coming up slowly down the Atlantic. Excuse me one second. I just want to minimize this over here. Perfect. Made her way across the Atlantic as a weak tropical weather disturbance. Eventually, she became stationary in the central Bahamas on the 24th, and was classified a tropical depression on my birthday, August 25th.
Excuse me, Charlie?
Yes.
Can you please let the guests in the waiting room in, please?
I certainly can. 8 people, I don't know how can I do it? See waiting room?
Yep.
Admit all.
Let them all in, please.
Yep. Okay. Are they all in?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, let me.
I can't tell. You're the one who knows.
Okay. So the system steadily intensified over the warm waters, attaining tropical storm status late on the 25th and hurricane status on the 29th. As is frequently the case prior to many landfalling hurricanes in the Northeast, a very cool fall-like air mass, courtesy of a Canadian high-pressure system, crossed northern New England on the 27th. As the high-pressure system moved east on the 28th and 29th, a moist southerly flow at the surface began to affect the region. The rapid deepening of this upper-level system quickly captured the hurricane on August 30th. By midnight, Carol was off the Virginia Capes, poised to head directly for the Connecticut shore. So here's the dilemma. The Washington meteorologists had to figure out where this particular thing was going to go. Recognizing that the storm was now being steered more northerly by the low pressure area moving out of the Ohio Valley and seeing blocking high pressure building just north and east of the hurricane, they had to make a decision as to how close Carol would come. By Monday evening, forecasters were cautiously optimistic that Carol would move northeasterly, possibly brushing Cape Cod, but for the most part, staying out to sea. Without satellites or modern technology, the Weather Bureau was blind. In addition, the light ship, the weather ship that was stationed halfway between Cape Hatteras and Bermuda, had been decommissioned for budget cuts. Doesn't that sound familiar? Okay, just want to let this person in. During the early morning hours of August 31st, meteorologists manning the weather radar lab at MIT became alarmed at what they had seen. The outer banks of Hurricane Carol were just becoming visible on the radar screen and confirmed that the monster storm was at least 100 miles further west than had been predicted and was racing directly for the Connecticut coast. Now I show this, let me just get the next slide up here. Why is it that? There we go. So this is, the woman on the left is Pauline Austin. She was a brilliant physicist. In fact, she was named, the New York Times named her the top female scholar aiding in the war effort. She joined what was known as the Radiation Lab, or the RAD Lab at MIT. There were 3,000 people working there secretly on different radars. And next to the atomic bomb, probably the most important things that we invented during that time was radar. Interestingly, her husband, James Austin, was Boston's first broadcast or TV meteorologist. He was on WBZ, and Bob Copley was telling me wonderful stories about him. He would come on the air smoking a pipe and say, "There's a cold front coming down from Canada," and then he would take a puff on his pipe. She would often go in with him, and for the first time, people in New England were seeing radar images with the forecast. So just a little sidelight I wanted to share. At 6 a.m., the lead forecaster rushed into the Boston office of the Weather Bureau. He was surprised that the office had already been warned by radar operators at MIT. At 6:30 a.m., the first calls were made to the state police and civil defense, and the word hurricane was used. At exactly 7:35 a.m., the first hurricane advisory bulletin was issued. It was too late. You have to remember, this was Labor Day weekend, and the whole southeast coast was still crowded with vacationers and summer residents. I was up early that morning, like I always am. I'm still up early. One of the first things that I did was to turn on the radio to get the forecast. I worked at a local club called the Shenecosset Beach Club. was a bathhouse boy. I would sweep out all the bathhouses. And at the time, I was probably hoping that I was going to get a day off because it was cloudy outside. What you see here is the beach club that I showed you earlier, a picture taken in 1954. Summer in New England in 1954 had been cloudy and cool. On this morning, the air was moist and warm. So when I turned on the radio that day, I could not believe what I heard. Not only was there a hurricane coming up the coast, but it was about to hit. I remember going out on the porch and looking out at the ocean. And I remember that the sky was jet black. I could see it like it was yesterday, and the sea was actually relatively flat. An hour later, all hell broke loose. So you can see that that forecast that they had, a hurricane forecast, was barely an hour. There was no chance for people to leave where they were. The leading edge of Carol crossed the continental shelf at about 7:30 and pushed a wall of water 10 to 14 feet high in front of it. All of us on the shore witnessed the same thing. The ocean raced in at such an incredible speed that it was really hard to describe. It wasn't as bad as a tsunami, not that fast, but I could literally watch the water rising over the rocks and then start coming up the seawall towards our house. And this is the way the sea looked almost immediately. Think of all of you remember the blizzard of '78. Nothing was happening at all. And then all of a sudden, just a wall came in of snow and wind. And this was pretty much what happened here. It just hit, and the sea became crazy. The picture on the upper left, the bigger of the two pictures, is New London, Connecticut. That tends to flood, but really took it hard in this particular storm. The entire downtown was flooded. And then, of course, there's Wareham, where you don't want to be. Wareham is a place that can experience upwards to 18 feet surge. This is downtown Wareham, and if it wasn't bad enough, the hardware store was on fire. And you can see some of the firemen there waiting up to try to put it out. Miraculously, they saved all of the buildings around it. As bad as it was in the center of town, it was nothing like what had happening out at Swift's Beach, if you're familiar with where that is. The ocean had engulfed most of the cottages as quickly. Nobody could possibly get out. Police and firemen battling terrifying conditions managed to rescue scores of people as they clung to floating logs and uprooted trees and even parts of houses. Okay, the lower picture there is what I started with. That's Galilee, where, as I told you, there were 80 boats in there ready for a wonderful fishing tournament. It's the biggest one of the year, Atlantic Fishing Tournament. It attracted some beautiful boats, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit later. And of course, there's Martha's Vineyard that always takes it on a chin here. The building to the left is the Edgartown Yacht Club. You can see that the water is right up to the roof line. Inside there's, on one of the walls, they have a mark and a little plaque for each of the major hurricanes and how high the water got in there. And if you're ever over there, it's a kind of a snooty club, but if you knock on the door and say, can I please see the, I'm doing some research on hurricanes, could I see all the markers? I believe, and I can't remember, I think Carl's was the biggest flood of all. That's the Reading Room, another private club over there on the right. Buzzards Bay rapidly filled with water, and by 10 a.m. Woods Hole was several feet deep in water. All power and telephones were out. As I said in my book, cars became boats and boats became kindling. And then in the Mid-Cape area, what, Don? Don, your mic is on. Okay, here's the Mid-Cape area, and just look over the car. This is in Yarmouth. Parker's River, you'll see a house that floated over from the other side. If you went down 28, I think it's like 5 miles long in Yarmouth, there were many cottages that were floated right across 28. In Providence, it was a regular workday and the city was jammed with people. At just about 11 a.m., the ocean began racing in and filled the streets so quickly that people could only watch from windows as their cars were flooded and many carried down the streets and washed into piles. Soon, the streets were clogged with chairs, desks, lamps in 4 to 8 feet of water. Joe Spolino, he was a visiting New Yorker, was listening to the locals speculating as to what might happen to the steeple of the Old North Church. So he bought a roll of film for his folding camera, climbed up on the top of an adjacent building, and waited. At this point, the wind was gusting to around 90 miles an hour in Boston. And just after 12 o'clock, in a violent gust that was well over 100 miles an hour, the steeple came down and he snapped this remarkable picture. So here's the reanalysis of the storm. They've done a reanalysis, National Hurricane Center, of all the major ones. And you can see in this case, the hurricane, the center of the hurricane was 30 miles to the east of where they originally thought it was. Hurricane Carol is widely viewed to be the most tropical of hurricanes to hit Connecticut. What's meant by that is that while the storm was likely going extratropical transition, take a look at this picture up here. It was taken from the Grizzled Hotel in Groton, Connecticut, about 2 blocks from my house, as the eye of the storm passed over. It was an amazing sight, and I still remember it looked just like that. At Blue Hill Observatory, the wind was recorded at 105 miles an hour at 11:05. Then blue sky as the eye goes over it. 10 minutes later, 125 miles an hour. This is an amazing story of survival and people at their best. Carol came in so fast that Westport, Massachusetts was flooded almost immediately. You can see Laura's restaurant in the upper left there. There were 3 people in the restaurant. James Hickey he lived there in an apartment above. Silva was one of the waitresses. James decided to ride it out. Harry and Natalie were trapped in the kitchen. At 10:30, the building came right off its foundation and washed out with the 3 of them in there. Well, a local person who was in a cottage right near there called up or somehow notified some of the neighbors, and they sent out 2 boats. How they did this, they rowed out there. They got the 2 people out of the kitchen through a window, but they had to chop a hole in the apartment up above in the roof to pull him out. I'm just going to let somebody in here. Pulling them in, and they rescued them. And then for those of us who love sailing, this is a horrible sight. This beautiful boat on fire sinking in Marblehead. So by early afternoon, it was battering the North Shore and heading up into New Hampshire. I took this picture. This is Eastern Point, Groton, Connecticut. This is probably about 1/10 of a mile from my house. I remember wading up there. I don't know how I got up there this fast because the ocean, as you can see, hadn't even receded very much. If you look in the middle of the picture, you'll see people standing on the roof of something. That's part of the Shinnecock Beach Club that was drifting down. And that's all that was left of the Shinnecock Beach Club, pilings. It was washed across a pond, the entire club, and all the bathhouses and all the cabanas, and smashed on the other side. This free meeting will end in 10 minutes. Thank you for telling me. Okay, a lot of the beautiful clubs on the coast did not make it through. Here's the Rhode Island Yacht Club. That was no match for Carroll. So 1,500 homes were destroyed in 1970, almost 2,000 with major damage. So pictured on the upper right is a point, and I can't remember the name of it right, Kanimekat, I believe it's called, where 60 homes were washed away and one person was killed. Now, David, I'm going to let you in, but I'm almost done. And this is a picture of the same point. And you can see what all that was left of these homes. And then, of course, Wareham, as I told you, you don't want to be. And 3,000 boats were destroyed or seriously damaged. And that's all that's left of that beautiful fleet of 80 boats that I talked to about in Galilee. And that's right, one of the wharfs in Boston, what it looked like during the storm. If there's anything good about hurricanes, like most disaster, it brings people together and they seem to grow bigger with the storm. These people are very happy to leave Fairhaven, I'm sure. That's just giving you a little view of the next event. Edna, 11 days later, we had a Category 2 storm. The eye went right over Martha's Vineyard. People who were not old enough maybe didn't even know this. It was a Category 2, 11 days afterwards. I just want you to take a quick look at the similarity in the weather patterns. I don't have time to read about this, but you can see they're almost identical patterns, 11 days apart. And this is look at the barometric pressure of the two storms, how very similar they were. But people forget, Hazel then hit almost right after that. Although it did not hit New England, we still had very, very strong winds up here and flooding. It was an amazing storm, and it had killed 400 and some odd people in the islands before it even came to this country. Another 95 in this country, and another 80 on top of that in the Toronto area. Amazing storm. So here you all know the slosh programs. Possibly in a major Category 3 storm, we'll have 18 to 19.4 feet in Buzzards Bay up near the Wareham. And this is an amazing thing here. They did a simulation of Edna. If it were a few miles, a couple of miles further to the east, it will fill Cape Cod Bay and possibly cut off the lower Cape from Wellfleet all the way out. The water will come right across the Orleans Rotary and from Rockport and should make it all the way to the other side in a Category 3 storm with that path. So it's been 66 years since the last Category 3 storm, and we know it's going to hit again. So thank you all. I'm going to try, I do have a book. It's right online, and I'm going to see if I can unmute everybody. Don, how do I do that again? Don? Don? He's not there.
I'm here. I forgot to unmute myself.
Okay, how do I unmute everybody?
It says unmute under participants down near the bottom.
Oh, yeah, that's the problem. Wait a minute. By the time I do it, it's probably going to be over here.
Yeah, you got 5 minutes.
I do? Okay.
Okay. They're unmuted.
Is everybody unmuted?
I am, Charles.
All right, great. Great.
Okay. So now, folks, if you can mute yourself unless you have a question, please.
Anybody have a question?
I had a silly question. The blizzard is 78.
Next.
Why wasn't that considered a did so much destruction?
I'm afraid somebody has their mic open. We're getting a double feedback, and I can't hear you.
That's okay.
It must be someone that has two devices turned on.
I don't.
Yeah, if we could ask everybody to mute except for Michelle, who had the question.
Hey, Michelle. Try again.
I was wondering what the difference was between the blizzard of 78 and a hurricane. I
Well,
thought that was
they're entirely different structures. The one is a cold core system, the winter ones, and a warm core, sucking off the Gulf Stream and feeding on that. They're entirely different structures to them. The results are the same, though.
Yeah.
Some of our winter nor'easter 2005, for example, have the same effects, if not even stronger, because they last so much longer.
true. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, Charlie. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What was the barometer reading in Groton, Connecticut when it made landfall?
I knew somebody would ask me a question that I couldn't answer. I don't have that at my fingertips. I really apologize.
What do you think it was?
Well, it would have been probably in the high 28s. You have a category 3 storm. That's about as intense as you can get in a storm. And if you notice, both Carol and was it 38 that we compared it to on that graph? I showed you the picture.
That was Carol and Ed that you compared.
No, I'm talking about the barometric pressures. That little how close they were together. But anyway, I can't look that up. I don't have time for you right now. I apologize. But anyway, thanks everybody. I don't want to just have it cut off without me saying thank you for joining today. I really appreciate it. It was quite a remarkable event, and I remember it.
That's a wonderful personal presentation. That was just so good.
All right.
Terrific.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
I said one was lost, but